Peter Eriksson from Sweden, yes. I feel very strongly that the global economy is drugged by fossil fuels. All the countries in the world need to break from this severe addiction. The green core issues, the reasons why green parties were formed in the first place, are now in the focus of world politics. Climate change has made green politics more necessary and urgent than ever. It's our mission, the Green Party's mission, to explain how to create sustainable development. I think that it's necessary to point out the positive aspects of this transformation, such as improved quality of life and new sustainable jobs. We will not succeed unless we bring more people on board that want a world free from dependence on fossil fuels. Many of us have focused on national efforts. It has been and is work that is needed. The climate issue is global, but all emissions are local. But we see today that how that work is not enough to create the necessary change in time. We need a more international focus and partly new perspectives. The result so far from global cooperation on climate issues is not impressive. The Kyoto Agreement was really a great failure. The world cannot afford another failure like this. In Copenhagen and in the coming agreements to limit global warming, real change must be brought about. In 10 years it will be too late. The strategy to limit greenhouse gases needs to be developed. I will now address 3 areas where we Greens need to focus on more: the extraction of fossil fuels, the subsidies on fossil fuels, and the investments in sustainable development. Initially, I want to issue a warning. At the international level, many politicians and researchers, including Greens, put their hope in different market-based systems with emission rights. In Europe, we have seen such systems in action for a couple of years. They could be part of a solution, but so far they have not given any positive effects. Rather, they have been used as an argument to abolish the existing eco-taxes that actually work to limit emissions. I think that it can be dangerous to put too much faith in emissions trading. The trading systems must be embraced by a large amount of countries. To work, there need to be authorities in control of the situation and the companies in the different countries. Corruptions need to be kept at a very low level. Besides, we need politicians that dare to cut down the allocation to such an extent that some companies won't survive. Do we have such authorities? Do we have such politicians? Do we have citizens that elect such politicians? So far, the answer to all these questions, unfortunately, is no. It's even harder to believe in some form of individual emission rights that some Greens are advocating. I simply do not think that it will work in practice. The focus of the global work to limit emissions must change. We need measures and agreements that can make a global impact without requiring 2 bureaucratic control systems and could easily be understood. It's also necessary to find solutions with a global effect, although not all countries are joining or pushing for it. I have a few suggestions. Extraction. One area is the extraction or supply of fossil fuels. So far, we Greens have, to a large extent, focused on developing measures to limit the consumption or use of fossil fuels. We have proposed things like eco-taxes, congestion charges, and collective transport. That is good and necessary, but not enough. There is even a risk that the decreased use of fossil fuels in some countries lead to lower prices and increased use in other parts of the world. We also see now that the higher oil prices tend to lead more and more money for investments in the big oil companies. I believe that it's important for us to put more energy and greater global focus on the supply question, on the extraction of, first and foremost, oil and coal. Every drop of oil taken from the underground will be used. Every drop of oil that humankind does not take out from the Earth's reserves therefore has an impact. both by limiting the emissions and by contributing to higher prices. I'm definitely not a fan of the former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, but in this sense, albeit involuntarily, the politician who perhaps to a larger extent than anyone else contributed to decreased emissions when she made sure that the coal mines in England were shut down. All other comparisons aside, the world needs more politicians with such a courage. What does this mean today? I can give you some examples. One very concrete issue in the next few years will be in the Arctic. Soon there will not be enough ice over the North Pole to limit the exploitation of natural resources in this area. We know that there are enormous mineral resources. If we succeed to prevent or limit the extraction of fossil fuels in the Arctic, we could stop the use of perhaps 20 to 25% of the world's total findings. Today, there is a treaty regulating and limiting the exploitation of Antarctica, the Antarctic Treaty System that was supplemented in 1998 with a protocol on environmental protection. This protocol bans all activities related to the extraction of minerals. 46 countries have signed that treaty. A similar treaty for the North Pole would be extremely important. The coming decade will be decisive also on this issue. Greens all over the world need to unite to demand an agreement for the Arctic that stops the extraction of oil and gas for at least 100 years. An agreement that stops the exploitation of the North Pole is an issue that needs to be brought into the climate negotiations immediately. Another example of an important issue concerning extraction is the tar sand or oil sand in Canada. There are major findings, but the extraction requires large amount of energy and brings about enormous environmental degradation. The Greens could contribute by putting pressure on Canada in this issue. Limiting the extraction and not a penny more from public funds to investments in fossil fuels could be green political targets to work for at the national level. Today, pensions funds, for example, are often used to feed the oil industry instead of renewable and sustainable energy. Subsidies. Subsidies are another strategic issue, both concerning the extraction and consumption of fossil fuels. Today, comprehensive subsidies supporting increased CO2 emissions are common in rich as well as in poor countries. In Copenhagen, the issue on agreement to limit and phase out subsidies should be included. Some examples. In Germany and in other countries, coal mining is still being subsidized. In Sweden, as in the rest of the world, aviation and airports are being subsidized through lower taxes as well as direct support. In Argentina, the government supports petrol and diesel. In Buenos Aires, it's therefore possible to buy petrol at price below the world market price for oil. Election campaigns on who can promise the cheapest energy or even energy for free are not uncommon. The last time I saw this was when I was an election observer in Georgia this January. The phase out of subsidies to fossil fuels should be brought into the negotiations on a new climate agreement. And this can also be a political issue at the national level. Investments. Comprehensive and often large-scale investments are necessary to create a more sustainable society. Time is short and it's therefore a gigantic challenge. The Greens must also focus on functioning existing alternatives. Opposing all alternatives is not a feasible or sensible strategy, and we cannot just represent alternatives that will be in place in 10, 20 or 30 years from now. Therefore, biofuels are necessary as a part of a sustainable strategy. There are different solutions in different parts of the world. We haven't seen all the opportunities yet. The bad experience from example, palm oil and corn must not be a hinder to the positive alternatives. It's therefore important that we support those that do not collide with the goals of biological diversity and poverty reduction. Great investments are required to build up sustainable energy production in the form of renewable energy sources. Solar, wind and wave energy are examples of existing technologies that are competitive and needs to be produced on a large scale to replace the current global fossil dependence. The change from fossil dependence will take place through a transformation in every city and every country. This means that the Greens must suggest major investments in modern and public transports on rails. It's a matter of replacing roads and aviation with railroads. Major investments in a more efficient energy use in housing are also necessary. The urgency of the climate issue creates a situation where the Greens need to be society builders, political architects and engineers. We have to make claims for the investment budgets in a much greater scale than earlier in both local and national parliaments. In conclusion, I would like to point out these three areas where Green parties can contribute with more to bring about a transformation and a greater effect to the climate work. One is limit the extraction of new oil and coal sources. 2, phase out the subsidies to fossil fuels. 3, propose even greater investments in more efficient and sustainable energy and transport structures. These, I believe, are necessary and possible elements in a future and greener international climate agreement. It's a policy that is decisive to bring about a change. Politics can contribute through tax changes, laws, and a lot of other tools. The Green parties must learn how to use these political opportunities in a smarter way. We cannot wait another generation. It's urgent. Green politics is needed now all over the world. Thank you.